Okay, so I have started the recording. All right. So can you all hear me? Please unmute yourself and tell me yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Sorry, is my voice clear? Not broken? Not too bad? Okay, excellent.
No, ma'am.
Okay, excellent. All right, so we will start the course now. And so how many? I see 27 of you now, but anyways, we will start. Okay, so the first thing is, please remind me anytime if I forget to record. So for instance, now we are recording this meeting, yeah? And the next thing is, at any point of time, if you have a doubt, a question, suggestion, please stop me, yeah? Unmute yourself and ask. Yeah, please do not, meaning try to avoid in chat. If this is working, if you can unmute yourself and speak, that would be the best. All right. Do I make myself clear?
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yeah. All right. Okay. I'll try to share my screen and let's see. Yeah. So here it is. So entire screen and share. Yeah, and then I open this. Is this working? Can you see lecture?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it's all right.
All right, excellent. Okay, so let's start. Let's see how it goes. Yeah. All right. So the first thing is that the first thing I would like you to do is that I would like to look at Bartley and Shepard's book, Introduction to Real Analysis, and study at home section 1.1 and 1.2 of chapter 1. Yeah, once the class is done, I will also try to post the PDF on Moodle. So don't worry if you don't have that book already. Yeah, so please don't worry. I will sort of post the PDF of these sections. I like you to read it on your own. Any difficulties, we can take it up. But it is very sort of basic introduction. Okay. So the next thing that I want to talk about is this. Yeah. So first thing is this font size okay? Meaning, are you able to see? This is too small for you?
No, ma'am, it's okay.
It's okay. Yeah. Let me just zoom. Sorry. Yeah. So is this bit okay?
Yeah, this is
Yes, this is okay. All right. Okay. So the first thing that we are going to start off with is some discussion on logic and proofs. Yeah. So this material I have again borrowed from Appendix A of Bartley and Shepard's book. Yeah. It is towards the end of this book. Don't worry if you don't have this book. I will post the PDF file by the end of the day today. Okay. But let's see what I have to say today. Okay. So what is that I want to talk about? So, all of mathematics is based on statements. What is a statement? A statement is a string of symbols which is either true or false. Yeah. So there are various kinds of statements. So some statements are always true. So what do we call those statements? We call such statements as tautologies. Yeah. For example, of a tautology is 1 + 1 = 2. Yeah. This is always true. Another statement, there are statements of the kind which are always false. Yeah. So what do we call those statements? We call such statements as contradiction. Yeah. An example, 2 = 3. Yeah. This is always false. We say this is a contradiction. And there is one more scenario, which is some statements are sometimes true and sometimes false. Yeah. For example, you look at the statement x² = 1. Yeah, depending on what values x takes, this statement is sometimes true and sometimes false. Yeah, is that okay so far? Yeah, is that a yes with everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay. when do we say two statements are logically equivalent? Yeah, we say that two statements P and Q are said to be logically equivalent if statement P is true exactly when statement Q is true. And hence, statement P is false exactly when statement Q is false. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. So here is an example of a logically equivalent statement. I say that statement P is X is a natural number and statement Q is X belongs to the set of natural numbers. Yeah, so I've just written it. Yeah. So I say that over here in this example, these two statements are logically equivalent. Yeah, and this symbol, that I have used here between these two statements is the symbol for equivalence. Yeah, I don't know if I can point. Let me try. Yeah, so I'll sort of explore. I am sure one can do it, but I am sort of not so savvy with these things, so I learn how to point it out. Yeah. So for now, we have an example of two logically equivalent statements. Yeah. Okay. What next? The next thing I want to talk about is negation of a statement. Yeah, see, we will be talking about these things left and right in this course. In fact, throughout mathematics and statistics, these terms, this terminology is very frequently used. So I would like you to be sort of to understand this stuff very well. Yeah. So let's see. If P is a statement, then what is the negation of a statement? What is the negation of the statement P? It is denoted by not of P. And what is this statement negation of P? Negation of P is true when P is false. And negation of P is false when P is true. Yeah. So I'm sure you have seen this stuff, but it doesn't hurt seeing it one more time. Is that okay? Is that okay with everybody present here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. The next thing which I want to talk about is implication statement. Yeah. So here statement P implies statement Q. Yeah. So this is the notation here, and sometimes it is also written as if P then Q. Yeah. Meaning if statement P holds, then statement Q holds. All right. Yeah. So please don't worry about writing these notes. I will put it up on Moodle. Everything will be on Moodle. Yeah, don't worry. So what I expect you to from this course is, all of you should be able to sort of understand definitions, apply them in simple cases, apply logic. Yeah, and as I said the last time, one goal of this course is to learn how to write mathematics and express it rigorously. Yeah. So let's see. So we are sort of slowly heading towards that goal. So let's see an example of this, yeah, implication statement. So over here, when we say P implies Q, there is a certain nomenclature. We say that, so we say that P is the hypothesis and Q, statement Q is said to be the conclusion. All right. Yeah. This is rather shabby. Yeah, so statement 2 is the conclusion. So let's see an example. Yeah. So supposingly, I ask you, what is Pythagoras theorem? Yeah. So what is Pythagoras theorem? One of you, whoever is willing, please unmute yourself and tell me what is Pythagoras theorem.
A square plus perpendicular square is equal to hypotenuse square.
Sorry, say that again.
Base square plus perpendicular square equals to hypotenuse square.
Yeah, but what is this perpendicular? What are ABC here?
Okay, ABC. In a right angle triangle, the sum of the square of the adjacent sides of the right angle, sum of squares of them are equal to the square of the sum of the opposite side of that angle, right angle.
Sum of the square of the hypotenuse. Yeah. So this is what I meant. You know, when you say, see, the moment Jan says Pythagoras theorem, start saying a square plus b square equal to c square. But one should tell me what is a, what is b, what is c. Yeah. So what is the statement? In a right angled triangle, a square plus b square equals c square, where c is the length of the hypotenuse and a and b are the lengths of the of the sides of the triangles, of the other two sides of the triangle. You know, so how do I sort of reword it? What is P here and what is Q? Statement P is A, B, C are lengths of the sides of a right angled triangle. C is the length of the hypotenuse. And statement Q is A square plus B square equal to C square. See, this is very, very essential to sort of the rest of 2 years that you are going to do here. The fun, you know, anytime you're given a problem, the first thing is what is given to you and what is that you're required to show. Yeah, so what is the hypothesis and what is the conclusion required? So one must recognize that. Is that okay? Yeah, everybody with me up till this point? Is that a yes with everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah? All right. Okay, so the next thing which I want to talk about is contrapositive of a statement. Yeah. So what is the contrapositive of a statement? So suppose that I have an implication, statement P implies statement Q, then what is the contrapositive of this implication? The contrapositive is not Q implies not P. Yeah? Recall what is not Q? Not Q is negation of Q implies negation of P. Yeah? So this is a small exercise. I would like all of you to check that the implication P implies Q is logically equivalent to the contrapositive statement of the simplification. Yeah? What am I saying? That the implication P implies Q is logically equivalent to not Q implies not P, which means that if P implies Q is not true, then not Q implies not P is also not true. And moreover, P implies Q is true exactly when not Q implies not P is true. Is that okay?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
is that okay with everybody? You know, feel free to ask if there is a doubt. Do I hear a yes with everybody? Is that okay with everybody present? Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Ma'am, can you please repeat this once again?
So I'm saying, suppose that you have an implication. Yeah, statement P implies statement Q. What is that I mean by contrapositive of this statement? Yeah. So the meaning is that you look at the implication not Q implies not P. Right? That's the first thing. Now the exercise is to check that the implication P implies Q is logically equivalent to the implication not P implies not Q. Sorry, is logically equivalent to the statement. Sorry, I take my words. Not Q implies not P. I'll give you an example. Yeah, let's see the example and maybe you feel a little better about it. So let's see this example. I have this example. If X is strictly less than 2, then X is strictly less than 3. Yeah. So my statement P here is X is strictly less than 2. And statement Q here is, in the context of this example, X is strictly less than 3. Is that okay? Is that okay? Now, what would be the contrapositive of this statement? The contrapositive would be not Q, negation of Q. Yeah, implies negation of P. Yeah. What is the negation of P? Negation of Q here? The negation of Q. So the statement Q is X is strictly less than 3. The negation of Q would be if X is not less than 3. Correct? And what is the negation of statement P? The statement P is X is strictly less than 2. The negation of statement P would be X is not less than 2. Yeah. So again, going back to this implication, if X is strictly less than 2, then X is strictly less than 3. The contrapositive of the above implication is if x is not less than 3, that is to say x is greater than equal to 3, then x is not less than 2. That is, x is greater than equal to 2. Is that okay? Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Sorry,
Yes,
you know,
ma'am.
actually, when I share my screen, no, I don't get to see or sort of your name, whoever is asking the question. Neither your, meaning I just see my screen and nothing else. Yeah. So whoever asked this question, can I know your name, please?
Yeah, my name is Niladri, ma'am.
Niladri. Okay. So Niladri, is this okay? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, ma'am.
Yeah. Is that okay? Shall we move on to the next thing?
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So the next thing which I want to talk about is the converse of a statement. Yeah. So given an implication P implies Q, what is the converse to this implication? The converse would be Q implies P. Yeah. All right. Is that okay with everybody? So let's again take an example. Yeah. So again, you know, let's go back to this previous example. Suppose I have this. Yeah. So my given implication is this. If x is strictly less than 2, then x is strictly less than 3. Yeah. So P here is x is less than 2 and statement Q is x is less than 3. Yeah. So my question is, what is the converse to this statement? The converse to this statement would be Q implies P, which means that the converse statement is if x is strictly less than 3, then x is strictly less than 2. So for example, in this example, you see that while this implication is true, you know, if x is strictly less than 2, then x is strictly less than 3, but the converse statement is false. Is that okay?
Yeah, ma'am.
Is that a yes with everybody?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, everybody with me?
Yes.
Yeah. So the point quoted is there are two concepts that we recently sort of talked about: contrapositive of a statement and converse of a statement. While the contrapositive is logically equivalent to the given implication, the converse statement is not. Is that okay? We just saw an example, you know, this implication is true, but the converse is not true. Is that okay? So they're two different things, very different from each other. Please do not confuse contrapositive with the converse. The converse statement may or may not be true, and it is not logically equivalent to the given implication, but the contrapositive statement is always logically equivalent to the given implication. Yeah, so I sort of did not discuss this first part, which says that the contrapositive is logically equivalent to the given implication. I have left this as a little exercise for you. Is this okay with everybody so far?
Yes, ma'am.
Everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
all right, excellent. Okay, so let's see what do we have next. The next thing which I want to talk about is double implication. Yeah, what is this? So the notation here is P and the sign is if and only if Q. Yeah, and sometimes it's also written as P I double F Q. Yeah. So what is this double implication? We use this notation P if and only if Q to say that the statement P implies statement Q and statement Q implies statement P. All right. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Okay. Okay. What next? So whatever your undergraduate degree is, I'm sure you haven't missed quantifiers. What are quantifiers? So to say this like this, yeah. So mathematical statements involve expressions like for all, for every, for some, there exists. Yeah, these are called as quantifiers. So this is the notation. I'm sure. I believe everybody here has seen this notation before. For all, for every, and there exists. Is there even one student who has not seen this notation before? Please speak up. I will sort of know you, where you stand and we'll sort of take you together. Yeah, my goal is to take everybody together in the same boat. Yeah, go ahead, go ahead. Yeah, so are there students in the class who have not seen this notation before? Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
if you can.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So everybody
Yes,
has
ma'am.
seen this notation before?
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, everybody is familiar with this notation. Okay, let's see.
Yes, ma'am.
So let's see an example. Yeah. So here is a statement that I am making. Yeah. For any integer x, x square equals 1. Yeah. All right. Right. So what does this say? This is saying that what does this say? This is saying that there exists an integer x such that this statement holds true. Which statement? Such that x square equal to 1 holds true. Yeah. All right. So what do I want to talk about? Let's see one more thing. Yeah. So what is the next thing I have? So the first statement here, for any integer x, x square equal to 1, this involves the universal quantifier. Which one is for all? Yeah, for all integer x. Yeah, for all, for any, for every. Is that okay? And the second statement is there exists an integer x such that x square equals to 1. Yeah. The second statement is saying that there is at least one integer x such that x square equal to 1. Yeah. Does everybody here understand that the first statement in red is different from the second statement in red?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah? Is that
Yes,
true?
Yeah.
Okay, great, great. Okay, so let's see some more examples. Yeah. So the first thing is, so I have written a statement in English and I want everybody to get familiar with symbols. Yeah. So let's see what is it saying. For every integer x, there exists an integer y such that x plus y equals 0. All right. So, so here it is. So this script z is the notation for the set of integers. So for all x in the set of integers, there exists y in the set of integers such that x plus y equals 0. All right. So here is one statement. Yeah. And let's look at one more statement. Yeah. The second statement is there exists an integer y. So what I have done is now I have flipped the order on the first statement. So now I'm saying there exists an integer y first. There exists an integer y such that for every x, the x plus y equals 0. Yeah. So let's see symbols, how it is written. There exists y in the set of integers such that for every x in the set of integers, x plus y equals to 0. Yeah. Please note, and I want all of you to make note of this, that these two statements are very, very different. Yeah. For instance, you know, what am I saying? For every x, there is a y such that x plus y is 0. So this statement is true. Yeah. For example, y is negative of x will fulfill this condition. But the statement the second statement is false. What is it saying? It's saying there exists one single integer y such that for every integer x, x plus y is 0. Yeah, that does not happen. So the second statement is false. The moral of the story is, the upshot of all of this discussion is that the order in which these quantifiers appear is very, very important. Is that okay? Does everybody understand this bit? That first statement is different from the second statement? And you cannot just flip
Yes.
the order without changing the meaning of the
Yes,
statement.
ma'am.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes? Yeah. So here is
Yes,
a
ma'am.
general thumb rule which is being followed in mathematics and statistics. So if several variables appear in a mathematical expression with quantifiers meaning for all there exists, then the value of the later variables should be assumed to depend on all the variables that are mentioned earlier. So what is that I want to say? So you know, what is I want to say in the context of this example? So go back to the first example. So the first example is, what appears first is for all x in the set of integers, there exists y in the set of integers. So what it's saying is there exists appears later for all appears first. So this y possibly depends on x, which is true. You know, y is negative of x. Y changes as x changes, right? Is that okay? Yeah. So the value of the later variables should be assumed to be dependent on the variables that are mentioned again. So although it's not explicitly mentioned that y here in the first statement depends on x, but that is taken as a thumb rule. Is that okay? Everybody with me so far?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah? Yeah, please ask if you have some doubts. Is that okay? Shall we go ahead?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
ma'am.
Yes? Okay. All right.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
This is great. All right. Let's see what we have next. Okay. So here is it, you know, about how do we sort of go about proving something? Yeah. So one way is the following. So in order to show that a certain statement is false, yeah, what statement is false? So let's look at this statement. Every element x in some set has a property p, yeah, script p. So I have this statement that every element x in some set has a property p. Yeah, I want to show that this statement is false. I want to show that it is false that every element of this set has a certain property p. In order to show that, it is enough to produce just one single counterexample. Yeah, so all I want to highlight is what is the meaning of counterexample is. All I have to do is I have to produce one particular element in this set that does not possess the property p. Yeah. So in order to show that the statement is false, that every element x in this set has property p, it suffices to produce a single element x naught in this set which does not have this property p. Is this okay?
Yes, please, ma'am.
Yeah, is this okay?
Yes, ma'am.
So for example, you know, this is the statement. For all x in this set having property p, I am considering the negation of this statement. That for all x having this property p, what is the negation? Negation is denoted by not of for all x having the property p, and it is given by saying there exists an element x in this set with not p. Yeah, so there exists an element x in this set which does not have this property p. Is this okay with everybody present here? See, we will be using this left and right, not only in this course, but in your other courses also. Yeah, it is just plain common sense decoded in mathematical symbols. Everybody with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yeah. Is that a yes with everybody
Yes, ma'am.
present here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Yeah, so let's see what I have to show next. Now let's look at another statement. Yeah, so the another statement is using the quantifier there is. Yeah, let's just focus on this one at the moment. So there exists an element y in some set that satisfies a property p. Yeah, so what is my statement? My statement is this. Yeah, so my statement is that there exists an element y having property p. Yeah, and what is it I want to show? I want to show that this statement is false. How would I go about it? To show that it is false that there exists an element y having property p, what is it we need to show? We need to show that every element y in this set fails to have property p. Is this okay? In order to show, yeah, so let me repeat one more time. Yeah, in order to show that there is an element y that satisfies this property p. So sorry, I'll say that again. Yeah, so look at the statement that there exists an element Y that satisfies property P. And what is that I want to show? I want to show that this statement is false. So in order to show that this statement is false, all we need to do is we need to show that every element Y of this set, every element of this set fails to have property P. Is this okay? Yeah, so let me sort of do it one more time in terms of symbols. So my statement, given statement is that there exists an element Y having property P. Yeah, and I am considering the negation of this statement. So what is the negation of this statement? There exists an element Y in this set having property P, that is denoted by not of this statement. And what is the negation given by? The negation is given by for every element Y of this set, not P. Yeah? So for every element Y in this set, the property P does not hold true. Yeah? Every element Y of this set fails to have property P. Is this okay with everybody?
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, is that a yes with everybody present here?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah? Let me sort of make the screen size small and let's see. How many of you are here? I have 41. Okay, good. So, all right. So, I have everybody with me up till this point. Any sticky point, please ask. Is there a question?
No, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. No. So what example sort of illustration that we did was there was a single statement and we negated it. Yeah. It may happen, in application there will be several quantifiers and used, and these changes will be used repeatedly. Yeah. Okay. So let's take an example. Yeah. Example. So here is an example. For every delta positive, so delta is some positive number, A is some set. Yeah, some set. I don't want to talk about it now. Which set? Some set. So for every delta positive, there exists a Y in this set A such that Y belongs to the interval minus delta to delta. Yeah. In other words, you can say that for every delta positive, the interval minus delta to delta contains a point of the set A. Is that okay? For every delta positive, there is at least one element of the set A that lies in the interval minus delta to delta. Correct? Yeah. So my question is, what is the negation of the statement? Yeah, so I would like, some of you to come up, volunteer. What could be a negation of this statement? What would be a negation of this statement?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah. Who? Tell me your name.
My name is Sonko.
Sonko. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, its negation is there exists some delta greater than 0, for which minus delta interval does not contain any point of A.
Does not contain any point. Yeah, so let's see. So does everybody follow this? When you negate this statement, for all becomes there exists, and there exists becomes for all. Yeah, that's what we talked about in this. So what is that we have to show? We are saying this. For every delta positive, the interval minus delta to delta does not contain, sorry, I'll take that back. Let me say one more time. So my given statement is, for every delta positive, the interval minus delta to delta contains a point of the set A. Yeah. The negation of this statement in English would be, there exists a delta such that the interval minus delta to delta does not contain any point of A. Is that okay? Yes. So how would you write it? There exists a delta such that for every element y in the set A, y does not or cannot belong to the interval minus delta to delta. Is that okay? Or other way of writing the same thing is that there exists a delta positive such that the interval minus delta to delta does not intersect with the set A. Yeah. Is this bit okay with everybody? This example?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yeah. Please ask if there are questions. I'll just pause for 2 minutes. Any doubts, please ask. See, in a regular class, I see the faces of students and I can make out whether they have understood or not. Here, you have to speak out and help me out to make sure that you have, really understood this concept. Shall we go ahead? Is this okay? I am okay with spending some more time on this. Everybody follow this? Everybody with me up till this point?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes? Yeah. Somebody has a doubt?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead. Tell me. Tell me. I don't hear anybody. So does that mean it's all okay and we go ahead?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, this was a little bit about logic and proofs. The rest of it, so I sort of tried to do some examples. As I said, I would like all of you to read this segment on logic of proof from Bartley and Shepard's book. I will post the PDF, the relevant pages from the book in PDF format. I'll try to post that on Moodle as well. Yeah? And as and when I do that, I will also sort of send you an email that you can now look at. All right? Okay. Yeah. So if all of this is okay, then I would like to sort of start with the real numbers. Yeah. So this is sort of chapter 2 of Bartley and Shepard's book. So all of you are now sort of postgraduate students. So we would not be following the book word by word or section by section, bits and parts, and I'll try to supplement it. But from my end, I will sort of try to emphasize at any point of time if I make a large deviation from this book. Yeah, is that okay?
Yes,
Is that
Okay.
Yes. All right. Okay. So I will try my hand at sort of scribbling something now. Yeah. Okay. So the real numbers. Let's start with this. So this notation we have already used. So this is the set n of natural numbers. And what is this? This is script z. Again, we have used this notation. The set of integers. Yeah. And the next thing which I want to introduce is script q, the set of rational numbers. So what are rational numbers? Rational numbers are quotients of integers are called as rational numbers. Yeah. So what is this? This is a set of the form m by n such that m and n are both integers. M and n are both integers and n is different from 0. Yeah. And n is not allowed to be 0. Yeah. Okay. So geometrically, the integers can be represented on a line by fixing a base point. Yeah, so let me try to draw something. So you fix a base point, and this base point signifies the number 0, and you sort of mark points on this line at a unit distance. Yeah, so this is 1, 2, and similarly, likewise to the left. Yeah, -1 and things like that. Okay. Now you suitably sort of subdivide this segment between 0 and 1. Yeah, so you look at this interval 0 and 1, and you suitably, so for example, so given a natural number 2, I would like to mark 1 by 2 on this sort of number line. Yeah? So what I do, I divide this interval between 0 and 1 into 2 segments and mark 1 by 2. So similarly, we can represent rational numbers like 1 by n, where n is a positive integer, like this, right? And this process, can be sort of done. This argument can be used to represent any rational number by a unique point on the on this number line. Okay. So the next statement, which is rather loose, is the following claim that the set of rational numbers spread themselves rather densely on the number line. Okay. So what do I mean by this? What do I mean by the statement dense? We will sort of make this precise at a later point in the course. Yeah. So for now, I will say this. What I want to highlight is that there are several gaps in this. Several gaps remain. Yeah. So what I want to say is there are numbers which are not rational numbers. What is that I mean to say? There are numbers which cannot be written as quotient of two integers like this. Yeah. So for example, I want to say that the number square root of 2 can be represented by a unique number between 1 and 2 on the number line using simple geometric considerations. Yeah? So let me write it down. 2 can be represented by a unique point between 1 and 2 on the number line. And how does one do this? This is a sort of simple geometry. Yeah, I will not go with it. But the claim is that square root of 2 is not rational. Yeah. So what is that I want to say? I want to claim that there is no rational number r whose square is 2. Yeah. So that brings me to the first sort of theorem of this course. Yeah. What is that theorem? Here is the statement of the theorem. There does not exist a rational number r such that r square equals 2. Yeah? There is no rational number whose square is 2. Yeah? So I believe the statement is okay with everybody present here. Is that a yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So let's see the proof. Yeah, let's see the proof. We should sort of see one proof at least in today's lecture. Okay, the proof. So let us proceed by the method of contradiction, yeah, which we just learned. So what we do, suppose I am given a certain statement P, which is there does not exist a rational number R such that R square is 2. Yeah, I would say suppose this statement is not true. Yeah, so what does it mean? It means to say that there is a rational number R whose square is 2, right? Yeah, so let's write that down. Yeah. So suppose there is a rational number R such that it satisfies the following statement. Yeah, the square of this rational number R is 2. Yeah. So what do? I am going to write down. I am going to write R as R is rational, right? So which means that there are integers P and Q such that R is the quotient P by Q, and I'm going to say that P and Q are both positive integers. Yeah, I can make that. And I can further say that P and Q are both not even. And P and Q are not both even. Yeah, so what does it mean? One of them is allowed to be even, but both are not even simultaneously. So I can always do that. Yeah, so if both are even, I can just quotient out 2. Is that okay with everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? Yeah?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And since so P and Q are positive integers, and sort of let me emphasize that Q has to be necessarily different from 0. Yes? Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Let's see. So let's sort of try to analyze what can we do. Yeah. What is the only thing that we are given? We are given that R is rational. We have utilized that fact. Written it as a quotient of 2 integers, and the next thing is we are given that the square of R is 2. Yeah, so the square of R is 2 means P square is 2 square. P square is 2Q square, right? So let me see, where do I write? So over here. Yeah. So since what is given to me is P square is 2 times Q square, let's analyze this statement. The first claim I make is that P square, it follows that P square has to be even, right? It follows that P square is even, right? So if P square is even, I claim that this implies that P is even. Is that okay? Does everybody see that? Yeah, because if
Yes,
not,
ma'am.
so if P is not even, then let's assume P is odd. Yeah, so P is of the form 2k minus 1, where k is some natural number. Yeah, so then P is of this form. And then what do? P square P. Yeah, so what is P square going to be? P square is going to look like, so it is square of 2k minus 1, so which is 4k square plus 1 minus 4k, and I claim that, let me write it like this, 2 times 2k square minus 2k plus 1 minus 1. Is that correct? Yeah, is that correct? Yes. So what is the advantage of writing this? You know what I have in the bracket here is some number, right? So this says that P square is odd, yeah? Which cannot happen, right? I am working under the assumption that P square is even. So ultimately, the upshot of this discussion is that if P square is even, it will follow that P is also even, correct? Yeah. So let's analyze where have we reached, yeah? So what is that we have? We have reached this point. P square is 2 times Q square, and P is even. Yeah. Okay. So what do? How can we utilize this fact? So let's sort of look at the statement one more time. So if P is even, so this means, what does it say about 2q square? This says that 2q square is a multiple of 4, right? Which means that q square is even. All right. And just like the discussion we have above, if q square is even, this would imply that q is even, right? I'm going to write that down. This forces that q is even. All right. Now what have I have both p and q to be even, right? This cannot happen because I assume that p and q are not both even. Yeah. So this is a contradiction. This contradicts the way p and q are chosen, and hence we are done. All right, and hence we are done. Yeah, so this proof ends. Is this okay with everybody present here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, everybody with me so far?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. All right. Okay. So, couple of exercises. You similarly, should try to explore. So, by the way, do you see this as I write? Do you see that in the real time, or is it broken at your end?
There is a slight delay, ma'am. But
There's a slight delay, but is it too bad, or this is okay?
no, ma'am, it's legible.
Is it all right with everybody?
Yes, ma'am, it's okay.
I think the delay depends on how fast the internet is at the other end, right? That is my sort of understanding. But let's see if this works out, or we will switch to some other way of teaching. Okay. So, similar to this, I would like to sort of all of you to try out the following problem. Is there a rational number R satisfying the following statement? Yeah, is there a rational number R whose square is 6? Yeah, similarly, is there a rational number R whose square is 3? Is there a rational number R whose square is 12? Yeah. So I leave these problems for you to work out. Yeah, I'll also sort of incorporate them in the assignment, but for now, this is something for you to think about. Okay?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, go ahead.
I have an problem in previous proof.
Say that again. You have a problem in
Previous proof.
previous proof. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Tell me.
Yes, ma'am. We are shown the proof on the whole that P is even. So why we should show that the P is odd?
No. I am not saying that P is odd. See, I am making a claim here. I am saying that if P square is even, then this implies that P is even, right? So I am saying, why is this claim true? Why is this implies this statement true? I am saying, suppose this is not. So I'm proving this by negation. So I am saying I'm using the contrapositive. So I'm saying if P square is even, then P is even, right? So I'm saying suppose P is not even. That means that P looks like this. So if P is not even, then this little calculation tells me that P square is also not even. In fact, so that's a contradiction because we assume that P square is even. Does it answer your question?
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
It's not that P is odd. I'm just sort of giving you a little argument as to why is this implication true.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Why is the implication P square is even implies P is even? Why is that statement true? It's just a small calculation. I'm sure all of you can do it on your own. Yeah? All right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah?
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, ma'am.
All right. So let's go ahead. Yeah. Okay, so we will forget that everything about real numbers and things like that, and we will make the following statement. We will make the following assumption. Where do I write? Let's start here. So I say that we assume that there is a set. So this is just a notation at this point. There is a set like this whose elements are called real numbers. Let me write this down and then I'll sort of try to make sense out of it. Are called real numbers. What is that I want to make about statement about this set, which contains the set Q of rational numbers, which contains the set Q of rational numbers yeah, so in particular it contains the number 0 and 1. Yeah, so let me sort of highlight it. It contains the number 0 and 1. So what is it I said? I am saying that we are going to assume the existence of a certain set R, which contains the set Q of rational number, and that satisfies the following 3 sets of properties, such that the following 3 types of properties are satisfied. Yes, let me write down here. Yeah, so what are these properties? Let me list them one by one. One is algebraic properties. Number 2 is order properties. And number 3 is the completeness property. Okay, so let's go back to what I have written. I'm going to assume there exists a set R which contains the set Q of rational numbers and satisfying 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so why do I assume this? To define real numbers, to define the elements of the set, one actually begins with the set Q of rational numbers. Yeah, you remember we start with the set of natural numbers, integers follow, and then the set of rational numbers, which are quotients of integers, and then I am sort of trying to take the next baby step. I am trying to construct a larger set which contains the set of rational numbers. Why is there a need for this? In light of this theorem that we discussed. Yeah? So what we just discussed was that there exists a rational number R whose square is 2. Yeah? So all this theorem is saying in context of what I have written here in black ink is the following, that this new set R minus the set Q is non-empty. Is that okay? This theorem tells me the following thing, right? I just make note of this. Yeah, so I'll just write this over here. Yeah, let me write this and I'll sort of get back. This is non-empty in light of the theorem that we proved. There is a rational number R whose square, there is no rational number R whose square is 2. Yeah. So and so that number belongs to this set, the complement of the set of rational numbers. Yeah, is that okay? Okay. Now let me go back to this assumption part. So why do I assume this? So there is a proper construction. Yeah. So there are two standard approaches of construction of this set from the set Q of, you might be wondering what am I talking about, but sort of bear with me. Yeah, bear with me maybe for, I don't know how much time we have for the next 20 minutes or so, and hopefully I'll be able to make sense out of it. Yeah. So let me continue. So there are, so if you don't want to assume this, you want to see the construction of this set. So there are two standard approaches for the construction of this set from given the set Q of rational number. So one is, I'll just write that down because so write that down here. So there are construction of R from Q. So given the set of rational numbers, there are two standard approaches. One is due to Dedekind, or the other one is due to Hewitt and Stromberg. Due to Cantor. Yeah. So the first one, Dedekind's approach is there in Rudin's Principles of Mathematical Analysis. Cantor's approach is in a book due to Hewitt and Stromberg. Yeah. So for the purposes of this work, for the purposes of this course, I will not go into the construction. I will assume that there is a set R satisfying 1, 2, and 3. Yeah? Anybody who's interested is most welcome to read up these excellent texts and read up Dedekind's and Cantor's construction. Yeah. So for now, what am I going to do? I am going to assume that there is a set R containing the set Q of rational numbers satisfying 1, 2, and 3. And what is that I am going to sort of spend my time on? I am going to spend my time on 1, 2, and 3. The most important property, it turns out, is 3. We will get to it, slowly. We'll talk about 1 first, 2, and 3. The point we noted for now is there is a need for such a set because we just noted that there is no rational number satisfying the statement R square equals 2. Yeah. But we know that this number there is indeed something which satisfies R square equal to 2, and in fact you can sort of jot it down on the number line. Yeah. Is this okay with everybody present here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
so if that is okay, then I will move on to the first thing, which is the algebraic properties of R. Yeah? Yeah? Is this okay? All right. Nobody has said anything, so I'll just move on. So this is 1. Algebraic properties of R. Yeah. So this maybe seem like a repetition, but let's just go through it one time for the sake of completeness. So on the set of R, there are two binary operations denoted by plus and dot respectively. Yeah? Two binary operations. So R. Yeah. So the first one is addition and the second one is multiplication respectively, and they satisfy the following string of properties. Yeah. Let me list them one by one. I'm sure you're familiar with everything, but let me just do that for the sake of completeness. So the first one, where do I write? Yeah, let me call it A1 is this. let me sorry, let me write that first here. So I want to list the algebraic properties of R one by one. So let me write this. For all A, B, C in R, so for all elements of this set, what is the first one that I want to say? That A plus B is B plus A. Yeah. So this is the commutative property of addition. Yeah. It may seem like what am I talking about, but just bear with me. Bear with me for some time, and maybe it will make sense to you. End of it. The next is the associative property, which means that it does not matter whether I sum A plus B first or whether I sum B plus C first. Yeah. The next thing is existence of the zero element. Yeah. So there exists an element which I'm going to denote by 0, such that 0 plus A is A, and A plus 0 is A, and this is true for every element of this set. Yeah? The fourth property is additive inverse, existence of an additive inverse. So for each element in this set A, so each element A in this set, there exists an element which I'm going to denote like this, yeah, such that so when you sum this element with apply the binary operation this, you get the zero element, and the second statement, this is also true, right? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is about the first operation of addition. Let me list the properties of the addition, second binary operation of multiplication also. Let me write here the first property M1. So the first thing is that multiplication is commutative. Yeah? That's this first. The second property to note is that multiplication is associative. Yeah? So whether you apply this operation on A and B first and then to C, does not matter whether you apply to B and C first and then to C. Right? The third statement is about existence of a multiplicative identity. Yeah. So there exists an element which I'm going to denote by 1 in this set, and this one is different from the zero element, such that when you apply the binary operation dot, all you get is this, and this statement also holds true, and this is true for every element in this set. Yeah, so this is about existence of a multiplicative identity. Yeah? The fourth statement is about existence of a multiplicative inverse. So for each element A in this set, which is different from the zero element, there is another element, there exists another element which I am going to denote by this. Yeah. So assumption is that you don't know these things as of now. Yeah. We are trying to construct real numbers. We are going to assume that there is a set of real numbers satisfying these properties. So for each A, for every element of this set which is different from the zero element, there exists another element which I am going to denote like this, satisfying the following property. Yeah, so satisfying such that you get the multiplicative identity like this. And this again, we demand it to be true for every element in the set R of real numbers. Okay, the last one, as far as algebraic properties of R is concerned, is this, that multiplication distributes over addition. Yeah, so which means that given three elements, A, B, and C, so this is what I mean by the distributive property of multiplication over addition. Yeah, okay. So what is the upshot of all of this discussion? This is saying that the set of real numbers is a field. Yeah. So have you heard about fields before? Everybody present here has heard about fields?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Is that a yes with everybody present here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
This means a set with two binary operations satisfying A1, A2 up to so all of these, satisfying A1 up to A2, A3, A4, and M1, M2, M3, M4, M5 is said to be a field. So don't worry if you have not seen this before. All I just wanted to emphasize is there. So a field is a set with two operations, addition and multiplication, satisfying to be sort of I instead of listing this as M5, I should sort of write it as, this is the distribution property. Yeah, so satisfying A1 up to A4, M1 up to M4, and D. Yeah.
Ma'am,
Is that okay with everybody present here?
ma'am, can I ask something?
Yeah, good.
Ma'am, in the statement M3, why have you written 1 is not equal to 0? Why is it needed?
No. I am saying 1 is different from 0. So all I want to say is that this multiplicative identity is different from the 0 element here.
Ma'am, but trivially it is different from 0 because 1 is an element of from the set of real numbers.
Yes, and so is 0.
Yeah. So
See,
why is it?
See, you are saying this because you know that real numbers have addition, subtraction, the usual addition, subtraction which we are used to. This is not what I am talking about. I am saying I am going to assume there is a set R. This is just a notation satisfying these properties. So this 1 here is not the number 1. This 1 here is the symbol for multiplicative identity. And all I want to say is that this multiplicative identity is different from the 0 element, which is the additive identity. So 0 here is the notation for additive identity. 1 is the notation for multiplicative identity. And this statement here is I am trying to emphasize that the multiplicative identity is different from the 0 identity. So 1 is different from 0. 1 and 0 are just notation here. It later turns out that this is what we are actually using. Yeah. So, we are sort of trying to understand the real number system at this point. Yeah, it may look like, what am I talking about? All nonsense, but please bear with me. Yeah, as I said. Yeah, I'll try to, sort of slowly make sense out of it. Hope I, sort of tried to convey what am I trying to do. Is this okay?
Yes, ma'am, I got it.
If it makes some sense. Yeah. Any other questions at this point of time?
No, ma'am.
Yeah. All right. So if this is okay, then I would also like to talk about the order properties of R. Yeah. This is the algebraic properties, and the next thing is the order properties. Let's see. Order properties of R. Okay. So what is the order property of Arrhenius? So I am going to say the following property. So I'm saying that there is a. So let me write down and I'll try to sort of explain it. There is a non-empty subset. So this is just a notation at this point. So there is a non-empty subset of R called the set of positive real numbers, called the set of, again, you know, this is a nomenclature, positive real numbers. I'm going to call this as the set of positive real numbers, satisfying the following properties. Sorry. Satisfying the following properties. Yeah, what are those? So the first one, I'm going to write it as O1. So given any real number A, given any element in this set, exactly one of the following statement is true. What am I saying? Given any element in this set, only one of the following statement is true. What is it? Either A belongs to this non-empty subset. Well, that is one possibility. The other possibility is A is the additive identity, or the other possibility is that the additive inverse of A is in this set. Is that okay? Yeah. So given any element of this set, there are only one of the following can hold true at a given point of time. Exactly one of the following statement is true. Either this element itself is in this non-empty subset, or this element is the additive identity, which I am denoting by 0, or the additive inverse of this element is in this non-empty set. Is this okay? Does the statement make sense to everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
In this case,
Yes, ma'am.
I will go to the next one. So just like the algebraic properties consisted of, you know, A1, A4, M1, M4, and D, order properties consist of two properties, O1 and O2. Yeah? So the next one is the following. If A and B are two elements in this non-empty subset of R, then when I apply this binary operation, which I denoted by plus, this and the output that I get, that also belongs to this non-empty subset. And we talked about one more binary operation. If I apply that, then the output, which I denote by this, also belongs to this subset. Yes? Is this okay? Yeah. So given two, so what
Yes,
am I
ma'am.
saying? I am saying that on the set R of real numbers, there are two binary operations denoted by plus and dot. I'm going to call it as addition and multiplication. All the statement 2 is saying that there is a non-empty subset of, so this subset of R, such that this, which is closed under the operation of addition and multiplication. I pick any two elements in this non-empty subset, I apply the operation of addition, the output continues to be in the same non-empty subset. And so is what happens, and the same happens when I apply the binary operation of multiplication. Is that okay? So the order property of R is this, saying that I'm going to assume that there exists. I'm going to assume there is a non. So that is why I'm saying this is a property, you know. It's a property because I'm going to assume that there is a set, non-empty subset of R satisfying O1 and O2. Is this okay with everybody present here?
Yes, ma'am.
Any questions so far?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Yeah. So, you know, I think I will stop right here for today because you might have another class at 3:30 and I don't know if that is on MS Teams or something else. So you may need time to switch over. So I'll just stop right here. We will continue from this point next class. One more thing that I wanted to say is that for this Thursday's meeting, you know, we meet at 8:30 as well as at 2. Yeah. So at 8:30, I will continue with the regular lecture this time because we have not discussed enough material to take up an assignment problem. Is that okay? Yes. So it's a usual lecture, just like we
Yes,
had
ma'am.
today. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for your time. Yeah, go ahead.
And then at 2, we'll have the normal
2
class as
also
well.
for this week at 2 p.m. also we will have a lecture. The first tutorial will be the following week is what I want to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah. By then we will have some material and, you know, I'll hand over a problem set. Yeah. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Thank you so much for your time. So
Thank you, ma'am.
I'll just stop the recording now.
Thank you, ma'am.